What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Vanderbilt Commodores. Vanderbilt, of course, coming off a very surprising year last year in 2024. Last year, this team went 7-6, so they did make it to a bowl game, and of course, won their bowl game as well. So yeah, a big season for Vanderbilt last year, making it to a bowl game for the first time after like 7 years, being, since 2019, being at the bottom of the SEC. So obviously Diego Pavia made the difference for this Vanderbilt team, and he's coming back this year. He's back at quarterback as we start getting into things for 2025. This Vanderbilt team, they have a decent amount of production coming back on both sides of the football. Really the only concern that I have for this Vanderbilt team is they don't have talent. That's just the main thing about this Vanderbilt team. They don't have talent on the roster, but they do got some playmakers. The secondary, though, maybe that's the one area I have concerned about this Vanderbilt team on the defensive side of the football. But like I said, it's really going to come down to the playmakers for Vanderbilt to step up. Again, they don't have much as talent as some of the other teams in the SEC, but they also got a physical running back in Cedric Alexander. That's another playmaker on that offensive side of the football. So I think this probably could be one of the best running teams in the SEC, but let's now get to the schedule. And once again, it's a pretty tough schedule for Vanderbilt for 2025. Again, this is a team that was 7-6 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Vanderbilt team for this upcoming 2025 season. And they're going to start things off on August 30th against Charleston Southern. That's an FCS team. Should be a pretty easy win for Vanderbilt. I know Vanderbilt has struggled against like FCS teams and like group of 5 teams in the past. I mean, last year they did lose to a group of 5 team, which I'll get to in just a little bit. But yeah, Vanderbilt, I think they'll win this game pretty easily. Vanderbilt should know better to win these games now. So I got Vanderbilt starting off 1-0. And then they get ready for a big non-conference game on the road at Virginia Tech on September the 6th. This is a pretty big non-conference game. Of course, last year these two teams met in Nashville. This time it will be a road game for Vanderbilt. And obviously this game last year really decided Vanderbilt's season. They went on to have a pretty solid year. Virginia Tech was a team that I had high expectations for last year, but they obviously did not live up to the to the hype as much as people were expecting. So yeah, Virginia Tech, I think they'll be a solid team, but they're probably not going to be a team that's going to definitely get that hype this year. But they're playing this one at home. I do expect Virginia Tech to come in fired up for this one, especially after losing to this Vanderbilt team last year. And also, I saw the time for this game. It's a 7:30 kickoff time, so I think that's going to be extremely tough for Vanderbilt to win here, especially at a night game at Virginia Tech here in week number 2. And yeah, it's an early season game. It's an early season road test for Vanderbilt, so I think they come up a little bit short in this one. And so I think Virginia Tech, in a competitive game, they will get revenge on this Vanderbilt team from last year. So I got Virginia Tech getting the revenge win over Vanderbilt. So that does drop Vanderbilt their first loss of the season, and that puts them at 1-1. And then they play at South Carolina on September the 13th to open up SEC play. This is another tough place to play. So you got back-to-back road games here with Virginia Tech and South Carolina in the non-conference and then in the SEC. Yeah, very tough back-to-back road games. South Carolina, I think, is going to be a top 25 team this year. Lenore Sellers has already proven that he's a really good quarterback. And South Carolina does have a bunch of additions coming in the transfer portal. I wouldn't be surprised if this game is a little bit closer than you might think it might not be. I know last year's game was not even close, but I think Vanderbilt definitely could probably have a closer game with South Carolina this year. But I think South Carolina running the football is going to be probably the difference in this one. You got two quarterbacks that like to run the football, but I like Lenore Sellers running the football a little bit better than Diego Pavia. I know Diego Pavia has pulled off some big wins in the past against SEC teams, but I don't think it will be enough. I think South Carolina's running game will be the difference, and I think the Gamecocks do get the win. So that's back-to-back losses for Vanderbilt, so that puts them at 1-2. But then I got them beating Georgia State and Utah State. I think they beat Utah State pretty easily, but that Georgia State game, remember, Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State last year on the road. That's a game they probably should have won, and because of that, they ended up finishing 6-6 instead of possibly like 7-5. So I think that'll be a big revenge game there for Vanderbilt, but you never know. They could probably lose that game because they could come in a little bit beat up, especially after losing back-to-back road games with Virginia Tech and South Carolina both in the month of September. But that's going to put Vanderbilt now at 3-2 after back-to-back losses and then also back-to-back wins. And then they go on the road to play Alabama on October the 4th. Of course, Vanderbilt pulled off the big shocker last year, beating Alabama at home, but I don't think they beat them this time. I think Alabama will be ready for Vanderbilt this time. I think they'll come in extremely angry after losing to this Vanderbilt team last year, and a game that Alabama definitely should have won fairly easily, but that's also the reason why Vanderbilt was a surprise last year, is because they beat this Alabama team. Playing in Tuscaloosa this time, that's going to be extremely tough, so I think Vanderbilt does get blown out here in this one, and I think Alabama gets the win. So that drops Vanderbilt now to 3-3, and then they get their first bye week of the season before playing at home against LSU on October the 18th. LSU is a team that I think is going to be really good this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this team. I like the roster for this team, especially on the offensive side of the football. Garrett Nussmeier could be one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC this year, and I like the transfers that they've added. The offensive line is definitely a concern, but I think it will come along here for the Tigers. I mean, even though it's at home here for Vanderbilt, they get a bye week, especially after that tough test against Alabama on the road from October the 4th. They're not really beat up after that game. They just get that extra time to prepare, especially after that tough test against Alabama on the road. But I think it will be a close game, and I do expect Vanderbilt to be competitive in this game, but still, I don't think it will be enough. I think LSU is just definitely the much better team, so I think Vanderbilt does come up short here to pull off a huge upset like they did last year to Alabama, but I got LSU getting the win, so that's going to drop Vanderbilt now to 3-4, and then after that, it's a home game against Missouri on October 25th. The Tigers of Missouri, I feel like they're going to take a step back from where they were last year. Missouri, they have a lot of losses on the offensive side of the football, especially at the wide receiver position. So I think that's definitely a concern there for this Missouri team. And obviously, Missouri beat Vanderbilt last year, I think, in double overtime. So this is a big revenge game here for Vanderbilt. And I think they do that. I think they come in a little bit fired up, especially after back-to-back losses. I think they're a little bit beat up, after that LSU game. But still, I think Vanderbilt's run game will be the difference. Missouri's defense will keep this game close for a while, but I think by the fourth quarter, that's where Missouri's going to probably run out of stamina, and I think Vanderbilt has enough stamina to win this game, so I think Vanderbilt gets the win here over the Tigers of Missouri. So that's actually their first SEC win of the season after 3 losses in a row in the SEC. After that, they play Texas on the road on November 1st. I don't really expect this one to be a close game at all. Texas, I know, had a pretty tough time with this Vanderbilt team last year, but yeah, Vanderbilt had them at home. This year it's in Austin, so I think Texas, with Arch Manning, the addition of him at quarterback, I think that's going to be pretty tough for Vanderbilt to stop. So I think this is kind of like similar to the Alabama game. I mean, it's not a game that Texas will come out pretty angry, but still, Texas definitely should be the better team, and they should be able to win this game fairly easily. Of course, playing in Austin, so I think Texas gets the win here. So that drops Vanderbilt now to 4-5, and then they come back at home to play Auburn on November 8th. Oh boy, this is a tough one for me to predict. I've been really back and forth between these two teams. Last year Auburn had a pretty disappointing year. Vanderbilt actually beat them on the road last year in Jordan-Hare, if you don't remember. So yeah, that was a big story there. Vanderbilt beating Auburn last year on the road. This year they play them at home. So this is a game that really, I think, will come down to the wire. It's really a game that I think can go 2 different ways. It could be one of those low-scoring defensive games, or it could be an offensive battle. You got 2 really good offensive teams going at it. I think Vanderbilt probably has the better defense, but I think Auburn has got a slightly, a lot more playmakers than Vanderbilt does. I like the addition that they have with Jackson Arnold at quarterback. I think he's going to make this Auburn offense a little bit more explosive, and I know Auburn lost a lot of close games last year, but still, I think Vanderbilt, especially after losing to Texas from last week, they come in a little bit beat up. They don't have a bye week before playing this game. If they did have a bye week before playing this game, I think I would predict them to win, but they're playing at home the next week. I think that's going to cost them. So I think Vanderbilt is actually going to come up short, even though playing at home. I think they lose to Auburn here in a pretty close game. I'm going to say it's a shootout. I think it's going to be a pretty big shootout here between these two teams, but I got Vanderbilt losing, so I got them dropping to 4-6, and then they get their second bye week before playing Kentucky at home on November 22nd. You know, Kentucky is a team that I've been talking about, has a lot of question marks on both sides of the football. They have a lot of losses on the defensive side of the football, a lot of new faces coming in, and this might be the end of the Mark Stoops era. I don't really expect Kentucky to be all that great this year. I don't think they're the worst team in the SEC, but still, this is a Kentucky team that just has a lot of question marks. I think Vanderbilt, after 2 losses in a row, you know, after the bye week, that does help them out, so I think Vanderbilt gets a much-needed bounce-back win over the Wildcats of Kentucky. So that puts Vanderbilt now at 5-6, going into the final game of the season, and it's at Tennessee in Knoxville on November 29th, so Vanderbilt needs to win this game in order to make it to a bowl game, obviously. But yeah, playing at Tennessee, that's a very tough place to play, and they actually got some very tough road games. 5 tough road games here in the SEC, including that Virginia Tech game in the non-conference. Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough for Vanderbilt to win a road game in the SEC this year, because some of these teams, they were competitive at home, but I don't really expect them to be competitive in the road games this time against these very talented teams. I think this game will be a pretty close one in the first half, but Tennessee, that's probably where they pull away, and I don't really expect Tennessee to be, I don't really expect Tennessee to be like as good as they were last year, but I think this is still a very talented team. They're definitely way ahead of Vanderbilt as of right now, but I wouldn't be shocked here if Vanderbilt did win, because they have a bowl game here on the line. So I think Tennessee does win a close one here, but I'm going to go with the Vols to win that one. So I got Vanderbilt losing their final game of the season, and I got this team finishing 5-7 in 2025. I know a lot of people won't agree with that. I can definitely see this team possibly going 6-6 again. I don't really expect them to go 7-5 though, because that would definitely be a big shock to me if they did go 7-5. 6-6, I think 5-7, 6-6 are probably the most likely records for this Vanderbilt team. But we'll see what happens. Again, I was back and forth on that Auburn game. That's really a game that I can see going either way. If they win that game, they go to a bowl game. But if they don't, then they possibly go 5-7 in 2025, and then possibly could go back down to the SEC at the bottom. But still, I do expect Vanderbilt to get at least a couple of wins, maybe one win in the SEC this year. So yeah, 5-7 is what I'm going to go with here for Vanderbilt for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for Vanderbilt down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.